I was lonely during the COVID-19 pandemic, so I learned home bartending and it changed absolutely everything about my social life. In this video, I'm going to be sharing that exact journey with you guys and hopefully inspire you all to pick up home bartending. If you're like me and you're lonely, you're bored, you're socially isolated, and you want to build an amazing social life, I don't think there's anything better. I don't think there's any better skill to learn than home bartending itself. It changed my life, and I believe it'll change your life as well. So let's set the stage. It's June 2020. That's the time when I made my very first cocktail. And that was, as you may all remember, the middle of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. That was during the first lockdown. It was a time when a lot of people were learning a lot of new skills. They were spending a lot more time at home. Maybe they had lost their jobs or they were working remotely, things like that. So there was just a lot more time. You know, you couldn't have all these traditional social events. You couldn't go out to restaurants and go out to parties and clubs, and you couldn't travel. Your social life was very limited. So a lot of people spent time learning skills. I decided during that first quarantine that my skill that I was going to learn was going to be home bartending. It's something that I had thought about getting into probably for the previous 5 or 6 years. I'd probably thought about getting into home bartending 2 or 3 different times. And I always made these different excuses about why I couldn't start. And it took something as big as the whole COVID-19 pandemic to really change everything and to really push me to finally start learning home bartending and to finally make my very first cocktail just a few months later in June 2020, just a few months after the whole COVID-19 pandemic started. And it really changed everything because, you know, that was an extremely isolating time in American history and in worldwide history as well. You know, I'm only 33 years old, and that was the most socially isolating time of my life. And even those of you that are probably a lot older than me, it's probably the most socially isolating time of your life as well. You know, if you were in school at that time or you had a job, like you couldn't go to school, you couldn't go to your work, you had to work from home. If you could work, like myself, you know, I'm a medical doctor, so I obviously still had to go to work, but I had to wear masks, and you know, it was just like a whole different time. It was a whole socially isolating time. Even with work, you know, you couldn't do certain things. You had a lot of restrictions. You couldn't meet up with your friends after work. And on top of that, that was also the year when I graduated medical school and I was starting my residency. And I started my residency across country. I live in Las Vegas currently, and this is also where I'm from. But in 2020, I had moved across the country to upstate New York to a city called Albany, a very small town. It's a town where I knew absolutely nobody, and I was starting a new job. I was starting residency, which is the most important, the busiest time of a doctor's training. And, you know, I just felt so alone because I was across the country from my family. All my med school friends and friends from college and friends from school and things like that, they were all spread out throughout the country. Nobody was living in that exact city. I didn't know a single person in that exact city when I moved there. And on top of that, because of the whole COVID-19 restrictions, because of the whole pandemic, it was also harder to make friends once I got there. There weren't those traditional like welcome activities when you're starting a new job with a bunch of other people. You couldn't go out to like happy hours after work. You didn't have those welcome events for when I started that new job. You just didn't have as much things that you could do, and you couldn't go out to clubs and meet other people throughout the city. You couldn't, go to certain events throughout the city. There was no like concerts or events or parties or things like that throughout the whole city that you can go to where you can meet other people and, maybe develop some friendships. So a very, very socially isolating time, and something that I saw as a way to get out of that. I wanted to learn home bartending for a couple of different reasons, but probably the most important one was that I wanted to use it as a social tool. I wanted it to be something that would completely change my social life. And it did actually twice in the past, it's been nearly 6 years since I made my first cocktail. And during that time, I've completely changed. I built a social life that most people would be envious of. Most people would kill to have the social life that I had. And I built that when I was in Albany between 2020 and 2023. Then in September 2023, after I finished my residency, I moved back across the country to my hometown of Las Vegas. And although I did have my parents and some other family members here, a lot of my school friends and things like that had already moved away from Las Vegas, or I had lost touch with them. So I really had no social circle here. And now, less than 3 years later, I've also built up an amazing social life here as well. I built up a social life, again, an envious, one that people would be envious of, one that people would kill for, one that people would die for. This is the kind of social life that I have. And I built that twice in the past 6 years in two completely different situations, in two completely different parts of the country, two opposite sides of the country. And this is something that really allowed me to do that. When you learn home bartending, what it allows you to do is it allows you to host, house parties, host events at your own place. And this was especially important in the COVID-19 pandemic because at that time you couldn't go out to bars, you couldn't go out to clubs, you couldn't go out to restaurants. There were no parties, no events, no social gatherings, nothing like that allowed in the public. You could have these smaller get-togethers, and that's really what I did during that first year of home bartending, which is also my first year of residency. I was hosting these smaller get-togethers where I would just have like maybe a couple friends over, maybe just one friend over, and I would have these these kind of smaller parties, like maybe at most like 10, 12 people over. And that's really what started everything for me. That's what allowed me to develop those friendships and things like that. And then once the COVID-19 restrictions started to lift in 2021, and especially even more so in 2022, that's when I started to have these bigger parties, and I would make even more friends and have even more people over at my place and develop even more of these even bigger social circle, even more of these social connections. And not only with myself and other people, but also other people in there. A lot of great friendships formed within that social circle, within that group of people that came to my parties. Came to be called, my name is Ramen, so my parties became Bar Ramen. Bar Ramen referred not only to my apartment, it referred to my parties, it referred to really our social circle as a whole. I still have a group chat to this day of all the people that came to those parties when I was living in Albany between 2020 and 2023. There's a group chat of all of our friends in that social circle, and that group chat is literally called Bar Ramen. I'm one of just like 20 or so people in that group chat, but the group chat's named after me because my place became that place where, people gathered to have, to relax after tough weeks at work, to meet up with their friends, to have great times, great experiences with their friends, and obviously to enjoy some great cocktails as well. But really it became that social hub of my entire residency program. It became that space where everyone could go. And it was a reliable place you could go to at least once a month, oftentimes twice a month, or even sometimes more than that, where people could go, meet up with their friends, have a good time, have a drink, relax, vent about work, all these great things. That's what it became. And, because I learned this skill, because I learned home bartending, because I learned how to throw parties, because I learned how to make killer cocktails, because I learned how to make a host through trial and error, through all these things, through learning home bartending. That's what allowed me to develop that amazing social circle. And, these are friends that I still have to this very day. I just went to a friend's wedding. Two of my friends from that social circle actually got married earlier in April of this year. And I went to that event, that wedding, and a lot of other people from that same social circle were there. And it was really like a nice reunion of the people from that social circle. So, I still get to have these kind of events and meet up with these friends that I've developed through my own home bartending experience, through the parties and the get-togethers and the gatherings that I threw at my own apartment, because I knew how to do home bartending. And even in 2023, when I finished residency, and a few months later when I moved back to Las Vegas, my hometown, and I had no real friends here, I had my family, of course. So I felt that support. I didn't feel as socially isolated. And 2023 was a lot different than 2020 in terms of social isolation. There were a lot of events, parties, things like that you could go to. But I still felt somewhat alone because I didn't really have a good friend group here. And home bartending is, again, something that allowed me to build that friendship circle back up again, to build a new friendship circle here. And it's something that's been an important part of my social circle, an important part of my social life here in Las Vegas. After I moved back here, I don't have as cohesive as a group as I did in residency, but I still have get-togethers every now and then, and I also still go to other people's places and make cocktails for them. I still get invited to lots of parties because I know how to make cocktails. I'm somebody that if you're hosting a party, you want me to be on that guest list because I can make drinks for your party. I can give you suggestions. If you want to make drinks or if you want to have something for your party, I can give you those kind of suggestions. So I'm somebody that gets a lot of these invites. I'm somebody that people want to have at their parties. People want to have me at their get-togethers because I know home bartending, because I can make those parties and those get-togethers a lot better. And that's what allowed me to develop this new social circle a second time, moving across the country to a city where I had really no friends again. And I was still able to do that. I didn't have the challenges of the whole COVID-19 pandemic and things like that. I had different challenges. I was starting a new job. Working as an attending doctor is not as social as working as a resident doctor. I was moving back to my hometown, moving across the country, all those different challenges. And I was still able to build up an amazing social circle here. A lot of my friends also at this stage of life, when I was in residency, a lot of my friends, were single, didn't have kids, things like that. It's different now. A lot of my friends are older, they have kids, they're married, things like that. So even with all those challenges, still able to build up an amazing social circle here. And I did it all through home bartending. So if you're like how I was in 2020, or even how I was in 2023, or definitely how I was in the 2010s when I was still like a college student or a med student, and you want to have an amazing social life, you want to have the social life, that people would kill to have. You want to have the social life that people are envious of. If you want that, if you want to be the head of your social circle, you want to be the king of your social group or the queen of your social group, home bartending is the best thing that you can learn. Out of all the skills that you can learn, home bartending is the absolute best one, because when you know how to make cocktails, that allows you to throw amazing cocktail parties. And then from home bartending, you then learn how to become a good host. You then learn how to throw great parties. And that really makes you the most important person in your whole social circle. Everyone wants to invite you to their parties. Everyone wants to come to your parties. Your parties are the place to be because you know how to make great cocktails. So if you're like me and you want to build that social life, if you were socially isolated during COVID, or even if you're socially isolated now, for whatever reason, for a different reason, maybe you moved to a new city, maybe you're starting a new job, you want to make new friends, whatever the case may be, if you want to build that amazing social life, then there's nothing better than learning home bartending. So I'm glad you found this video. And if you really enjoy this, go through all the other videos on my channel. I talk about a lot of different topics on home bartending. I do a lot of tutorials on different cocktail making, or on different cocktails and how to make them. So, if you really found this advice helpful, please subscribe to the channel and watch a lot of the other videos. I do two styles of videos on this channel. The first will be tutorials showing you guys how to make specific cocktails. So if you're looking to build out menus for your different cocktail parties, watch those specific videos, learn how to make those cocktails and really master those techniques and those recipes. And then the second style video will be more like this one, where it's talking head style. I go over stories from my own home bartending journey, share tips and tricks, answer questions, do guides on different topics and a lot of different things like that I hope will help you guys become better home bartenders. And finally, if you really found this advice helpful and you really want to take home bartending to the next level, I actually have a paid community on school.com. That'll be the first link in the description below. Anyways, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you. Cheers.